What's up, Amazon sellers? Getting an IP complaint can put a real dent in your Amazon business and potentially stop you from selling on Amazon altogether. Quite simply, today I'm going to go through a little bit about what IP complaints are and some top tips that are hopefully going to help you out. So stay tuned. If you don't know who I am, my name is Thomas Parkinson, and quite simply, I've been selling now on Amazon for 4 years doing online arbitrage in the UK. And I'm on a road or on a mission right now to do £1 million. I'll drop a link up there, have a look at that, and you can see my whole journey. But today, let's talk about what I'm going to go through and then jump actually into it. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to go through what is an IP complaint. Number 2, I'm going to talk about the difference between an IP complaint and brand restrictions. Number 3, I'm going to tell you about how to understand or know if you've received a real IP complaint. Number 4, I'm going to talk about suspected IP complaints and what you need to know about them. Number 5, I'm going to talk about how IP complaints affect your account health. And then number 6, I'm going to give you some top tips for dealing with IP complaints that hopefully are going to help you out. So let's get into it now. Okay, so first things first, what is an IP complaint? Well, quite simply, a brand, a manufacturer, or even their legal teams, what they do is they look for people who use their products unauthorized, or should we say their intellectual property, hence IP, and they raise a complaint with Amazon through their IP complaint system. This is just their way of telling Amazon someone is selling their brand or using their IP when they shouldn't be. Okay, so before we dive into IP complaints, I just want to address some common misconceptions. That leads me nicely on to number 2, IP complaints versus brand restrictions. Now, quite simply, an IP complaint is not the same as a brand restriction, and you need to be aware of that. You can still receive an IP complaint from a brand or manufacturer, even if you can sell the product. So if Amazon has allowed you to sell the product, does not mean that you will not receive an IP complaint. You can still receive them. Now you might be asking, why is this the case? Well, quite simply, there are going to be brands within Amazon which can be sold on Amazon, maybe even as a brand new seller, which contain the intellectual property of another brand that they don't want to sell. And as a result, they're not gated in it, there's not a problem, but it does contain the brand of another seller, which that manufacturer or IP owner can then raise a complaint against. Now, quite simply, a really good example of this is the case that a couple of products that we've sold in the past, and even in my account, is whereby we've sold some toy products basically with the Fortnite branding on them, but the brand itself wasn't labeled as Fortnite on Amazon. Obviously, the owners of Fortnite found this product on Amazon and then issued IP complaints against the people selling it because those products had Fortnite IP or intellectual property brand name on them, but they weren't listed as it, and Fortnite shouldn't have been sold. So we could still sell the product, there was no restriction, but it did have Fortnite logo, Fortnite branding on the product itself, even though on Amazon, the branding didn't say Fortnite. Now, another example we've had as well is back in the days of when we used to sell across the whole of Europe using the ENF. What we had once, I think it was a Tony & Guy product, we sold it in the UK, but also as well, that listed into France. And because within ENF, European Fulfillment Network, if you list it anywhere in Europe, it'll automatically list in the other marketplaces. Now, what happened was that the distributor within France had an exclusive agreement with Tony & Guy. They could control or dictate who was to sell on online marketplaces. Unfortunately, we weren't an authorized seller, and as a result, that distributor issued an IP complaint against us as a seller to say that we were not authorized to sell that product in that marketplace, basically due to a selective distribution agreement approved with Tony & Guy, the manufacturer, for them. It gets rather complicated, but quite simply, is to say, even though we were eligible to sell it in France and in the UK, and there was no issue with Tony & Guy directly in the UK side, in the other country, it did cause a problem, and we got an IP complaint about it, even though we could still sell the product. Now, quite simply, you might be thinking this is a minefield. Well, it is. Quite simply, if you can sell the product, you would think that if Amazon stops you from selling the product, you can't sell it and you won't get an IP complaint. But if you can sell the product, you shouldn't be getting IP complaints. But that isn't the case. Amazon don't make it clear cut, they don't make it easy, and that is why we have developed something called the FastTrackFBA brand checker. Now, this is quite simply all the known brands that we have learned about through maybe our own experience, other sellers' experience, and other experiences from people communicating with us, sharing the information about brands which raise IP complaints. What we've done, we've put it all together on the FastTrackFBA brand checker, and quite simply, I'll drop a link down below. You can go in, have a look at all the brands, see them for different marketplaces, and see what the complaints are raised against them. With us in our business, we literally use this as the Bible to ensure that we're not buying and selling any of those brands which are likely to have a brand complaint or an IP complaint logged against them. So check that out. I'll drop a link in the description below, and obviously you can use that as a guide to support you in making sure that you're just not buying those brands which are going to cause IP complaints against your account. Okay, so that leads me nicely on to number 3, how to tell if you've received an actual IP complaint. There are 2 ways that you will be notified, and you should get both of these, although sometimes you might miss one, but you should get both of these, which is going to tell you about when you've received an actual IP complaint. So the first one is Amazon is going to send you an email, and in the subject line that is going to quite simply say policy warning. So just keep an eye out for those, always be aware. Now the next one is whereby you can look into your account health, and quite simply you're going to go through performance, account health, and then received intellectual property complaint. And you can see there any complaints that have come through, and that Amazon's just going to give you an overview of them and you can see them. Those 2 ways are the way you're going to check or look to see if you've actually received an IP complaint. But generally speaking, a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times, what's going to happen is that a manufacturer or a brand owner is going to contact you directly first, probably through the Amazon messaging system. I just want to quickly go through that and explain what that is, and then also the steps you want to probably take after receiving such emails from a brand or a manufacturer. Now, quite simply, I'll put a message up here that someone shared. It's from a compliance team from a well-known brand. And quite simply, what they've done, they've reached out to the seller in advance of issuing an IP complaint to say, hey, we are going to issue an IP complaint because we protect the intellectual property. Now, sometimes you will get these from authorized manufacturers, but also sometimes you're going to get them from people who don't actually do it, i.e. other sellers trying to kick you off the listing. Whenever you get these emails, it doesn't mean you've received an IP complaint straight away. What it does mean is there could be an IP complaint coming your way very soon if you don't take action immediately. So let's quickly go through that and what things you might want to check. Number 1, check that brand name on the FastTrackFBA IP checker, and obviously I'll put a link down below, you can check that. Obviously what you're looking for is to see, is that brand a brand which logs and files IP complaints? Now, number 2, if they do, I'd really recommend, number 1, closing listings, and then number 2, messaging them back, thanking them for letting you know and letting them know that you've now come off the listings, you're no longer selling that brand's products. And then finally, what I will say, number 3, if you choose not to, it's up to you. Some brands may do a warning, but they won't actually do an IP. Number 2, it may be someone else who's trying to get you off the listing. We never know. It's up to you to make that decision. Okay, what I will say is stay to the end, because I'm going to share some top tips about getting back to IP complaints and what you need to know around them. So that'll be at the end of the video. Now this leads me quite nicely onto number 4, suspected IP complaints and what you need to know about them. Suspected IP complaints are ASINs that have been removed from the Amazon catalog because they're suspected to have an IP complaint that could be logged against them. This is a proactive measure that Amazon takes against certain products rather than a reactive measure, i.e. getting the IP complaint. Now, how do you know if you've got a suspected IP complaint? Quite simply, you just want to go look on your Amazon account, Seller Central, Account Health, Product Policy Compliance, and then Suspected IP Complaints, and you can see it right there. Now, the quick thing which we will say is that generally speaking, I don't believe it affects your account health too much. Now, and the reason why I say that is because we have seen extreme cases whereby people have had over 10 of these and they've not had problems, but I do believe Amazon will still measure it as a percentage of your revenue. So don't think you don't need to worry, just be mindful when you're getting too many, it could cause a problem depending on your revenue. So we have seen sellers with a very high number of them and they're still selling and they're in good account health, but just be mindful that Amazon might change the weighting rules for your account health at any point. Now, a good example of a suspected IP complaint could be, quite simply, there is a Mickey Mouse t-shirt that's got the word Mickey Mouse written in it, or maybe on the description. And what happens is that Amazon's bot detects that keyword, that phrase is there, and what it's done is just remove the ASIN, because Mickey Mouse is a trademarked brand that you cannot sell without is causing IP complaints. So just be mindful that this is a bot, an automated session system that is raising these suspected IP complaints and not an actual brand doing it. It's proactive by Amazon's own measures. Okay, so number 5, how do IP complaints affect your Amazon account health? Well, quite simply, there is no hard and fast answer. Amazon hasn't clearly defined, if you get this, you get that, if you get this, you get that. What we have seen is that Amazon will look at the number of IP complaints you've got, actual IP complaints, not suspected, that we're aware of, and they will also look at it against the age of your account and the volume of sales. Now, we've seen people with multiple IP complaints and had no problems, but also as well, we've seen brand new sellers with just one IP complaint and their account has been suspended. So there is no hard and fast answer. Best advice is to avoid it. Use the FastTrackFBA brand checker, link in the description, and quite simply treat every single IP complaint that you get as serious and take them seriously. Now, I'll say it again, if you get too many IP complaints, your account is likely to be suspended. Keep on top of them. It's something really, really important, and it's the last thing that you want to get, because hey, we just want to sell on Amazon, make the money. And remember, respond to all IP complaints and take them seriously. I think I said that already, but hey, we'll say it again. Okay, so quick question for you guys. Do you have an IP complaint right now? Maybe that's why you're watching the video. Drop it down below. Let us know any of the brands that maybe you've been flagged up on. Maybe we can help you out, or if not, what we can do is add it to the IP check and help other people out. Drop it in the comments below. Okay, so that leads me quite nicely on to number 6, which is some top tips about responding to IP complaints. First things first, don't panic, but do take it very seriously. It's really important because obviously it has an effect on your account health. Okay, so what I will say about IP complaints is they're notoriously difficult to be removed once you've got them. And we've heard examples of whereby a brand has actually requested Amazon to retract an IP complaint and it's still not happened on the account health. So just be mindful, they are a challenge. And I hate to say it, I would actually seek professional advice. As much as I'd like to say, go out there, do it yourself, seeking professional advice about removing these IP complaints is going to be really important. They're going to support you in getting IP complaints removed. The other option that you might want to do is ask in the forums. Really ask other people what they've done and how they've dealt with it. Different brands have maybe different ways that they've worked with. We don't know all the different ways that you can get removed, or who you need to speak to, and how you can get that. Certain brands, majority of them, will just say, no, we log the complaint, and that's it, we don't remove them. I would recommend drafting your plan of action or the response to the IP complaint and getting it checked by someone who's been through this process before, or even professional if that's the route you're going down. Now, the final thing for you to think about is, if you cannot get it removed, they will naturally drop off your account after 180 days. So they'll clear off, and they'll clear down after 180 days. So it's not the end of the world, just don't get any more IP complaints. Just keep running a safe account. And again, look at that FastTrackFBA brand checker. Okay, that is all from me today. If you liked that video, give me a thumbs up. And hey, if you want to see more like this, hit that subscribe button. But what I will do for you is I'm going to share a video around here of the dark side of Amazon. That is when I recently had problems with my payment account and Amazon stopped releasing money. And I had nearly £40,000 worth of cash tied up with Amazon that they just would not give back to me. So have a look at that. But for me, Thomas Parkinson and FastTrackFBA, thank you very much.